Hi, everybody. This is, well, that's me. I'm Lenore Von Stein, and this is yet another episode of The Facts. And I'm sitting here with Benita Marcus and John McGuire, two composers of new music. And we're talking about music. And we were just talking before the cameras came up about is that new music is in a position of changing the conversation. And you said it wasn't that always true of new music. And I just want to throw this one. Sometimes I listen, I'm at channel surfing, and I'm listening to, you know, Saturday Night Live or something for a second or something else, and I hear some latest rock, I don't know what they're called now, rock band, I don't know what they call themselves, but some band, you know, that's doing fairly, I would immediately, I think it's going to be pretty pedestrian. And then sometimes I'm struck by the asymmetry that's creeping in to the rhythms, of the music, and that's heartening. So is new music in the vanguard of the vanguard, or, you know, I don't know what to put, you know, because you'd said, you know, isn't it always true that new music is
kind of outside the mainstream? I think by definition, wouldn't it have to be?
Well,
think of the struggles of Charles Ives or Edgar Varese. It's been going on like for a long time.
These are Americans. I mean, if we looked at the same time period in Europe, we wouldn't be calling it new music or experimental music. I mean, they were more experimentalists in a way.
The Europeans, you mean?
No. Charles Ives.
I see what you mean.
Whatnot. So it's, in our country, to some degree, I think the definition of new music involves a certain kind of experimental approach. Whether the result is experimental or not is a different thing, but a very open approach.
By experimental, you mean I get into fights. I've gotten into fights with people on New Music Box when they said my work was experimental, and I said, how can an artist be doing anything but experimenting? I mean, it's all experimental, so how can it be experimental? Doesn't it?
Other people take exactly the opposite tack. Like Varese says, I do all my experimenting at home, and when the music is done, it's not an experiment anymore. It's finished.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So
experimenting it's not, I don't, when I teach and I work, I always start with brainstorming, which I consider a type of experimenting on all the aspects of what could be in the piece. I just throw it out there as fast as possible. And I always do what I call research. And the research is to consider every single possibility. And I think when we're considering every single possibility, and then selecting what works as opposed to what doesn't work, then that's a type of experimentalism, but John Cage wouldn't agree with it.
What do you mean by every type of possibility?
Well, let's say you have 4 pitches, and you want to try to put them on the vertical. You could put them close together, you could put them far apart.
I see.
So you consider, you could put them in different registers, you could invert the pitches.
So you have a very close definition first, and then you find out all the variants that could
all
take
the
place
variations.
within this close.
And Xenakis worked that way. I mean, he did it, and Cage worked that way. I mean, they generated material either via the I Ching or the computer. But they always had more material than they needed, and they selected what they wanted.
I think Bach worked that way too, didn't he?
I think that's how composers work.
I think that's true, yeah.
So, or they have worked up until this time.
How do you work? Is that how you work?
That's how I work, yes. Absolutely.
Do you think that's influenced by your practice of counterpoint? that you work that
Yes.
way?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because with counterpoint, as you go from just putting one note against another to the next, to the next, to the next, you really have to consider every pitch that could work there, and in what register would those pitches be in, and everything. So yeah, it is an aspect of counterpoint, absolutely.
And is that how you work too?
Uh-huh. I think we've all been infected by this same tradition. Yeah, I did a lot of counterpoint practice too. And so did Cage.
Yes, and I studied counterpoint, the old Viennese style, when I was a teenager, years and years of it. And so in a way I was trained like a European. And I was trained by a European in Madison, Wisconsin. But he could not teach me composition. Because even though he knew everything that led up to composition, when it actually became time to compose, he didn't know what to do. And
So was he a composer himself?
I don't know.
Was he a theory person, or?
He was getting a PhD in theory, yeah. He was from Austria. But what I'm trying to get to is that the same education you could get in Europe and not write new music, if you know what I mean? Because of this long historical culture, Western civilization, sort of hanging over their heads all the time. Here we don't feel that sense of history so much. Actually, we've actually gone to the other extreme where any sense of history is almost like bad news in your piece. And so
Unless you're in academia,
yes,
where it becomes a kind of requirement in your
yes,
piece.
you have to
I think.
justify it.
Yeah.
Justify everything you do.
Justify it in academic terms, too.
Yes, yes. And to me, a composer is another kind of performer, that writing music is a performance, and that you have to think about it as a performance, because ultimately that's what's going to happen. And so if you're bound up with justifying academically what you're doing, you're getting really far away from the idea of performing.
So I mean, it seems to me that there's a problem with the modern music in America being so wrapped up with academia. I mean, there's hardly any other place to play it, hardly any other place to develop, hardly any other, and that's one of the issues with the level of innovation, or that it's still like in the academy all the time here, because there's so little support, so little government support, so little funding support. Otherwise, I don't know. What do you think? I don't think you think I'm right.
Well, yeah, actually, I agree with you, but I would say it a little differently, because academia on the West Coast and academia on the East Coast are two different things, but they have the same result. I taught at Cal Arts for a while, and everybody's expected to be really crazy and experimental there and off the wall, and that's their sense of what academia should be. But they're always struggling just to get accreditation at their school because of it. And I was teaching orchestration there, and no interest, absolutely no interest in it. I mean, it was just all fun and games. Whereas you're at Columbia, you could speak about that. And it's another kind of academia that you have to follow certain rules, but it's completely different than what you would get at Cal Arts, for instance.
But very similar to what you would get at UC Berkeley, which is also on the West Coast. So I think it's pretty much coastal. I think Cal Arts is a real kind of exceptional situation as far as I know.
But they tend to turn out people that are very, very similar.
Pardon me?
They tend to turn out people that are very, very similar, which,
You mean UC Berkeley and Cal Arts?
No, just Cal Arts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see what you mean. It's depressing. That's a depressing term. Turn out people.
I went to Brooklyn College, to the Conservatory of Music at Brooklyn College, where I got a master's, and the people that were at the head of the department, and many people in the department, they were composers. I guess every semester there were composers' concerts, and they never came. They could care less about what the composers were doing. They had a really attitude towards
You mean
composing.
the faculty wouldn't
Yeah.
come to their
Yeah.
colleagues'
Yeah.
concerts? Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
The faculty wouldn't come to the student concerts
Oh, I see.
of composer concerts. They would, I would imagine they would, more of them, I know, more of them would come to the performance things when they were playing, you know, Beethoven's this, that, and the other thing. You know, they would come to that, but they wouldn't come to see the composers.
That's kind of a depressing situation.
Very depressing.
It may
I
have
used
had
to
to do
teach
with
at
that.
Brooklyn College. I was a professor for a while. But when I was there, the department was run by a composer, Dorothy Klotzman, and she only hired composers. She loved composers. She said, composers know everything. They can teach theory, math, history, whatever. They know everything. And there's some truth to that, I think. We really do have to know quite a bit if we're going to proceed in a big way.
I remember the story. Well, I know you remember because we just talked about it. The story of we were talking about the difference in the way the cultural conversation in the United States and the cultural conversation in Germany or in Europe, London in this particular case. And there was a piece of Coggles that Beth Griffith, your wife and wonderful soprano, who's in my ensemble as well, luckily enough, was doing a premiere here in New York, or a presentation, a piece of Coggles here, and
Yeah,
people
as far
didn't
as
pay
I know,
attention to it.
As far as I know, it was an American premiere.
American
of this piece
premiere.
by Coggle, yeah.
And it was completely not paid attention to by American critics, by American newspapers, by American cultural writers, whereas it was a big thing in Germany or in London.
Well, of course, it was a big thing in Germany because Coggle lived there, but she did it in London, and it was a big deal. I mean, all the prominent London critics came. I think the very next day there were 4 newspapers with long discussions of this performance. But here, she did the same performance. I took the trouble to print out invitations and sent them a week early to all the critics in New York, whose names I could find out. That was at Roulette, and Jim Staley at Roulette has those names. And not one came. Not one came to this Coggle premiere of one of his very best and most important pieces. At which point I kind of started to give up on New York, frankly. I thought, this is a place that seems to think of itself as some kind of world center. And I said, what? That's
Maybe
not the
not in
behavior.
music.
That's not the behavior of a world center, not by a long way. It's
Yeah.
kind of the behavior of a province.
And you compare even our things like the New York Philharmonic to orchestras in Europe, and my experience with the New York Philharmonic is basically they don't like to play modern music.
Oh, I think they only have one modern piece in their repertoire. The
And you can
Burial
really
Symphony.
hear it when they play it. You can really hear their attitude, or their maybe not their attitude, their out of touchness or something.
Yeah, I think it's more out of touch. I've conducted a lot of works by Martin Feldman, and I was present when the premiere of Coptic Light was done. He wrote it for the New York Philharmonic. It was performed by them. It was conducted by Gunther Schuller, and it was horrible. It was a horrible, horrible performance. I totally did not get the idea of the piece. And as a conductor, I cannot blame the performance. I have to blame the conductor, because it's really the conductor's responsibility to get the idea of the music across to the performers, and what their job is to make the piece work, and also to make them excited about playing the piece. That this is a fun thing. That there's things here that are really new and interesting, and Gunther Schuller did not do that. And when Morty walked on stage during the applause, the whole violin section booed him.
No kidding?
Yeah.
You mean they were boo like that?
Well, loud enough that people could hear.
Shit.
Unbelievable, huh? But you know, but that was a prejudice that I think would not have been there had there been a different conductor.
Certainly, that's a conductor's fault.
Yeah.
Wow.
So why did the conductor undertake to do the piece in the first place? You know?
Who knows? I mean, Jacob Druckmann was the person who programmed the concert, so maybe it was some relationship there.
I see. Okay.
Let's talk about, I got this list here, it's getting mighty skinny here.
It won't stop us.
So that won't stop us, right? What are you focusing on? The importance of focus in the process? Well, we talked about that a few episodes ago about not having the roiling and so that you can calm. You need a calm place in which to do stuff. Over the years, because there was many years where I didn't have a private place, and so I got used to making this, you know, just cutting off, and no matter what was going on around me, I just would work, because one had to. And well, you had mentioned also that I was talking about that new music was verboten in East Germany because they thought it was a decadent da-da-da.
Yeah, it was not performed in German Democratic Republic because they had all this political stuff, Stalinism and so forth. This was Western decadence. And they were contrasting, of course, with West Germany, where it was a big deal and was very well financed. So we know that that chapter is over pretty much, though.
But the continuing chapter of parochialism in the arts, or the way it's looked at the arts. I mean, when you told me that story, what flashed in my mind was the picture of the paintings of Nixon's daughters that were at one time that were they were incredibly bad. They were it's the same, you know, it's the same thing on the right, this kind of, you know, as it was on this kind of right-left, you know, Stalin, who, you know, is he on the left? I don't know really what he is, but this
He's dead.
He's dead, yes. This cutting out of the details in the conversation, or whatever it is that these more expressive art forms, you know, reveal by these, you know, Stalin, Nixon, Bush. So that, well, you know, I'm not saying anything we haven't said before, so that pat answers become more the only thing that's on the table, the only thing that's
it's
there.
It's safe.
Yeah, I mean,
It's safe. Yeah, because they're all, you know, let's face it, art is subversive. It's subversive to the mainstream culture that we have. And not subversive in a bad way, subversive in a good way. By introducing new ideas, by what would you say, challenging the norm, by the vision of the artists, for nothing else.
So you come up with a good definition of innovation in art, then.
That's
what you just did, yeah.
What was it? Tell us again.
Tell us.
Well, no, you tell it
I
again.
don't know. I
You
didn't even realize I was doing it.
You just did so well. Sorry, I didn't take notes, but it's all been recorded.
I'm sorry. You can just play the tape back 5 minutes.
I mean, for instance, with the as we tape this, it's Occupy Wall Street time, and the reaction to it, or not just the reaction to it. I mean, the good thing about it is that it's engendered so much reaction. One of the good things, you know, people are talking. You know, it reminds me of the good old days when the conversations were a little fiercer, the callousness of I stood with them. One day I went down and stood with them, and the bankers that walked by, and the different people that, I don't know if they're all bankers, but they're nicely dressed, some of them, and then I was at your party, and somebody was telling me, who's a lawyer down there, he was talking about the people that he works with and their attitudes towards them, and I know somebody who said, oh, it's just a fringe group, and this combination of ignorance and callousness that is sort of coin of the realm, and is supported by a culture that supports it. That there haven't been there haven't been enough other cultural inroads. Art is the subversive. There isn't enough chance for the subversive, punching enough activity, punching through the bag, to do their part in moving this conversation along. I mean, sometimes when I grew up in a political household, and sometimes it wasn't true of my parents, but often kind of sloganizing, which is an easy thing to fall into, and sloganizing art that goes along with it, propagandistic or I mean, I watch Democracy Now!, which I'm really very fond of, but I don't think she's ever had a serious artist on Democracy Now!, not a serious musician anyway. It's, it's all bum, da bum, da bum, da bum, da bum, da bum, come on. It's like the door suddenly, is closed on the quality, the other qualities of expression. And
it's very sad, because there is so much ignorance in our country. And this ignorance is, of course, leading to all the financial problems that we have today. But it's also, I particularly see it in young people, especially young people who are isolated in small towns and places like that, where they don't have options. And because they are not educated, because their schools are not giving them a variety of things to choose from, and because maybe their parents are square or just out deer hunting or something, they don't, I just see over and over again, kids in small towns. I have sisters that live in small towns. By the time they're 18 or 19, they're on drugs, they're on heroin, they're committing suicide. They're just, and it's all because they don't know that there are options and other ways to live in the world. And that's why so many of us leave our hometowns and come to New York, because we know there are options and they're not available in our hometowns. And we want those options. We need those options. We need those options to survive as a creative individual.
So listen, fine art is like a vault of options. It's just chocky block full of options that so you to help you because there's endless ways to do anything, but there certainly are a lot of walls, a lot of barriers to understanding that, to moving ahead. But
so what do you do about it? You asked the question about focus. Do you have some way of narrowing down all these options? When you speak of focus, I assume that's what you're talking about.
Focus in terms of when I'm focusing on what I'm doing, or
yeah, focusing on the process of composing is what I'm assuming that you're talking about when you mention focus.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to put it.
Well,
I haven't put anything yet. I'm just asking.
Well, I get lost. I'm writing a piece right now for viola, and I've never written for viola before, but solo viola, and yeah, and first I started. Here was my process. First, I started thinking about. I know this violist because she's in my ensemble, and I started writing, trying to hear her or listen for her or feel her. And then very quickly I realized I don't know her well enough I don't know. And so then I decided, well, write about, because I always write about things that, I'm always focusing on things that disturb me.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
They upset me, and when I write a piece that cracks open a door a little bit that I haven't been able to or something, I do it because it makes me feel better. And so I started to do that, and then there was something you said I can't remember it now, in a converse, or listening to the sounds and letting the sounds dictate the music, that you were listening to the sounds. And I thought, I should be listening to these sounds more in my head, and I know where they were, and
they're over here.
They're over here.
No, they're right here.
Oh, here they are. Okay.
So so anyway, what I'm focusing on, and very quickly in the course of writing a piece, whatever I'm focusing on, somewhere maybe the second week or something, usually takes me quite a while, disappears. And then the piece begins, this piece has already done that, it begins to take shape, and I'll say, I'll be darned, this thing has a shape, who knew? Not me. And and then it's editing, and then it's seeing, it's really beat by beat, what this really doesn't work. Do I need this here? We have 1 minute. One of the things I learned from Samuel Beckett, whose piece I took a 45-minute piece of his, and I spent 5 years doing this piece or more. But one of the things I learned from him was that every and, every comma, every but was justified from several different directions, so that it looked like it was like a piece of nature. And so I take that with me in the editing process. Is there really a purpose for this here? And you know how it is. Like you sort of love it for a while, and then you realize no. So that's how I make music.
Well, that's really quite cool about you focus first on something that disturbs you. That
Very
sounds like
interesting.
the process of the fish that makes pearls.
Oysters,
Oysters,
because there's a
yes.
piece of sand in
Because
there.
there's a
The
piece of sand
irritation,
that causes an irritation and results in a pearl. Sorry about the fish.
We've got to wind up this conversation.
Can I
30
just
seconds.
say that I think, to me, music is an experience that you live through. It's a very human experience. And I think what you're saying and your process, that you start with something what irritates you, and then you sort of experience it and see where it takes you. And that's what an audience wants to hear.
Okay, so here we go. I hope you want to hear it. Good night.